Hey everybody, welcome back. So today I am bringing back my very, very good friend Dre, aka VashSky. We're going to discuss a plethora, a huge amount of different topics going on right now. Dre, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, hello there. Good to be back, and man, I am excited. This one's going to be a good one, I think.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So first topic, okay, I
Mhm.
wanted to discuss. It was Mice Chat that released an
Okay.
article just the other day that there's cast members that are kind of coming forth, saying that Disney
Mhm.
is purposely suppressing the COVID numbers.
Mhm.
I know you've read the article. What are
Yep.
your thoughts on this, Dre?
Yeah. So it was a Daily Beast article. That's the source there, written by Tarpley Hit. It looks like, released September 7th, and the allegation is that Disney has been suppressing COVID numbers for purposes kind of unclear. We could assume that they've been suppressing COVID numbers for attendance or to stay open or whatever. And Yeah, that's the allegation. And there's numerous sources that they point to, but most of them are have no identifying features whatsoever, just unnamed sources. And then the people that they do name, they don't give full names. So I thought it was a dubious article, but we can get into the bulk of it.
Yeah, well, here's the issue that I have with the
Mhm.
article, or the claims, so to speak,
Yeah.
in that if this is true, right? Like if
Mhm.
this is true, Disney is purposely hiding these COVID numbers.
Mhm.
Um, it would almost have to be an industry-wide conspiracy because you're not seeing the numbers vary much between Disney and Universal and other theme parks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much even keel across the board. Like a lot of the Florida parks, and I'm saying Florida because they're the ones that are actually open mostly.
Right.
Um, you're not seeing like if you were to see like really high numbers coming out of Universal and then Disney's like super low, I'd be like, okay, there's something fishy with that. But
Right.
you're not really seeing that. It seems to be pretty even across the board. So is Disney conspiring with Universal and SeaWorld and suppressing these numbers? I mean, that's almost what it would come down to, right? I mean,
That would have to be the allegation. I mean, and you can use Occam's razor, the kind of argument that has the least amount of assumptions is usually true. Um, I don't think it's a conspiracy to really keep the numbers down for the entire industry, but it might be simply a compartmentalization of information, which is pretty standard practice. The article doesn't even go into like HIPAA, as it relates to employment, and whether or not you bring disease status for any individuals up. Usually, when it comes to these kinds of things, you let the people that are most likely to be affected by an infection within their department or within their area know, rather than just letting the cat out of the bag and going to the press or the media, or going public with information concerning individual cast members. So that's kind of the idea. The article also goes into stuff like, well, these cast members, they had to return to work or whatever. It's like, well, why? Why a lot of these cast members who were symptomatic or tested positive, they were forced to go back. Well, why were they forced to go back? It doesn't go into, did they go to HR and complain and were told and were denied? Did they go to the proper channels? Did they go to their leads? Did they go to their managers? Did they go to their union reps and attempt to tell them what was going on, what their issues were? It doesn't say anything about that. It doesn't say anything about going through the proper channels that you should go to, and being told no or being told otherwise. It just makes a case where, okay, Disney's allegedly doing this, so now we're going to go to the press and the government and get them shut down.
well, and I find that kind of, I find that odd too, because
Mm-hmm.
like I know for like my job, right? Like even before COVID, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if you're sick, if you got the flu or you have a really bad cold,
Mm-hmm.
my job and every job I've ever worked for really has always told you, don't come in. And they tell you not to come in, not because they're so worried about your health.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't really, they're not, I mean, let's be real. They're not really too concerned about you as a person.
Yes.
But they're more concerned about if you get sick and you come to the office, you're going to infect 3 or 4 other people. Now we have 4 people out instead of just 1.
Yeah.
And that's what most companies are thinking when they're telling you to stay home.
Well, yeah, it is for purely financial reasons, for purely managerial reasons. There are reasons to come forward and to have people sit out. Just even outside the purposes of caring for that individual cast member. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm wondering, like, what would be the motivation for Disney to force people that are COVID positive to go back to work so they can have 4 and 5 people out on COVID instead of 1? I don't understand that mindset. Like from a business standpoint, what would Disney's motivation be for that?
Well, that's the thing. There wouldn't be a motivation to have that take place. And you actually have instances in the article where people know that they're sick or people know that they're symptomatic or whatever, and they still go to work. And you have to question, why that is. Why aren't they telling people around them? Why aren't they informing union leads or whatever? Hey, look, I can't go in because I am symptomatic. There's just something that just doesn't add up with how the article lays it all out and what the thought processes are of everybody.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And now I might be wrong, and correct me if I am, please. But like for Disney, from my understanding, right, for Disney to report a COVID case, like to report it as like a Disney COVID case, right? Like their fault, I guess, or taking blame for it, I guess. It would have to be proven, if I'm not mistaken, that they contracted COVID on the job. So like, these are cast members. They're human beings. They go home to families, obviously. They go to the supermarket, they go to the bank, they go out to eat, they do other things. So just because a cast member is COVID-19 positive doesn't necessarily always mean that the cast member automatically got it while working at Disney. And if they can't prove that they got it on the job, would Disney be legally obligated to report that as one of their cases?
You know what? I actually don't know. That's a good question. There are different regulations when it comes to how Florida's doing it, how California's doing it, how a lot of business proprietors are doing it, given their jurisdiction within state and locales. There's no one set of rules regarding the entire country or the world. So, I think that's a very interesting question. I mean, it says, if I'm not mistaken, that I think the article mentions the regulations as far as reporting goes. They use Florida as the example. That they're pretty broad with how parks want to come forward with that information. I don't know if there's maybe necessarily a legal obligation to come forward with contracting it at the resort versus any other place. But it does say that a cast member got it while working at home. While at home, brought it back to the department, which they're saying is the horticultural irrigation department, and that's how the others. That's how it was brought into the group. Okay, which is another thing too. The whole mitigation policy regarding the Disneyland Resort or Walt Disney World Resort was all about anybody can have it, and you treat everybody around you as if they do have it, right? And you mitigate the spread going forward. So it's very strange how this one department it kind of went through the entire department so quickly, as is alleged in the article. It's kind of strange how that whole thing went. There's a lot of missing data. There's a lot of missing information, and it's just not being included. And I have to question the motivations as to why that is. But the article, at least as headed by its writer, takes a pretty biased approach to how they reference Disneyland and Disney and their management and so forth. But they do point to one particular person named Alicia, who is not even a cast member herself. She's actually the spouse of a cast member.
Okay.
And they reference her in the article quite a bit. That she's the main source, it seems. And the motivation, as outlined in one of the text chains that they had posted in the article, was, we want to bring these cases to light and essentially get the Disneyland Resort to close. That is our main goal. So the main goal isn't policy reform. It isn't, hey, we have issues or we have problems that we're looking to address. The goal isn't to look out for the health and safety of all cast members. It's to get the Disneyland Resort to close, and not even by Disney doing it themselves, but actually by the government actually shutting them down.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. And I wonder what would be like what's the point of that? Like it's, these are cast members who, this is their employer that we're talking, I mean, there's ramifications in regard to every month that Disneyland is shut down. The chances of furloughed employees coming back get less and less. I mean, they're going to lay people off. Eventually, you're going to go from being furloughed to having no job.
Yes.
I mean, if it keeps like this, right? I mean, that's not a good situation for any cast member.
Well, yeah, it's a horrible situation. It's a horrible situation through and through. Let's be fair here. But for cast members particularly, yeah, I mean, that's really bad. But this Alicia is taking it upon herself to go out and essentially, in her view, hey, it's not up to my standards, so it should be denied for everybody.
Wow.
Just close it on up, and any of the economic ramifications will hit the, that's a secondary concern. And you have to ask why. Why is that the overarching intention of this individual? You talk about the cast members that are working at the parks. You talk about, everybody is involved as they relate to Disney. But like we've talked about before, there are swaths of businesses in the surrounding Anaheim area that are really struggling, that really rely on Disney being open. And some of those are big chains. Yeah, they can close, but there are a lot of mom and pop areas. There are a lot of small businesses all around and up, in the Harbor Boulevard or Catella Avenue kind of district section of the resort district. They're struggling. They're hurting. And she's unilaterally saying, nope, this is what we should do. This is what I feel is justification for my actions. Wow. And it's completely unfair.
It is. And what's the end game? What's the end game to that? I mean, like a vaccine, because I mean, even with a vaccine, and I think people have like a misconception in regards to what a vaccine can actually do. It's not going to prevent COVID 100%. Like, we have a vaccine for the flu. We have a flu shot that people take every single year, and 50,000 people or so every year still die from the flu, even though we have a vaccine for it. Right?
I believe this last time it was about 80,000. Yeah.
80,000. Okay. I mean, so with COVID, it's going to be the same situation. We're still going to have people dying, unfortunately. And that's horrible, but it's not going to be a fix all. So what do people want? I mean, the vaccine isn't going to eradicate it completely. I mean, so do we just keep Disneyland Resort shut down forever? Well,
and that's why I think you're looking for clarification. I'm looking for clarification too. The whole idea for shutting down everything back in March was to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the principles of flattening the curve. Why flatten the curve at all? If you're going to have everybody sick, just get sick, right? The whole intention to flatten the curve was to extend out how many people actually, let's say you were going to have 250,000 people get infected, just scenario. They don't all get sick at the same time. You still have people get infected, but it's over a stretched portion amount of time. Rather than getting sick in a week, you get sick over the course of many months. That way the healthcare system is preserved.
Right.
Well, the healthcare system has been preserved this entire time.
Right.
Even in New York, where it just completely exploded, and it was a real fear that their healthcare system was going to be overwhelmed in that area. Andrew Cuomo said after the numbers started to go down, that, hey, nobody who needed a bed was denied a bed. Nobody who needed a ventilator was denied a ventilator. Nobody, their healthcare system was not overwhelmed. Okay, well, if that's the kind of, I don't want to say best that we can look forward to, but if that's the intention or the goal behind these shutdowns, then we should keep that to the in the forefront of our minds in terms of policies relating to reopening and getting back into this and into the stuff here. If the healthcare system cannot be preserved with whatever practices are in motion, maybe then you consider additional shutdowns or policies or enhanced mitigation. But that just hasn't happened yet in the Anaheim area or Southern California in general.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. And I think that the same rules apply. Like, and I'm not saying that the COVID isn't worse than the flu. Like it probably is, but like the thing with COVID and the flu is like, it's basically the same risk factors, right? Like if you're over 65, you have pre-existing conditions, an autoimmune problem, things like that. So the same, precautions that you would have taken if you have a loved one who has an autoimmune disease or a loved one who's 85 years old, you would take with COVID. It's the same precautions you would take with the flu. So I don't understand this whole thing about shutting everything down. Like if you're like 25 years old and healthy, you're probably not going to die from COVID. You probably have about the same chance of dying from COVID that you do from the flu. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, I think that it should be more surgical, but I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I don't know. That's how I feel,
The mortality rate for anybody under 25, I believe the number was just revealed as 0.02%.
Wow.
In addition to that, or it could even be smaller than that. But there was a press conference in the White House that revealed hospitalizations as they relate to people going to college, people going to university. And out of all the hospitalizations, which they were over 25,000, I'm sorry, yeah. Out of all of the, I should say, sorry, I want to get this correct.
No worries.
Out of all the infections, which was over 25,000, nobody was hospitalized.
Wow.
Not one, not a single college student. Wow. So that just tells you, I mean, we know a lot more about this virus than we did in March.
Right.
And we should, we were saying it back then, use the information as it comes out to implement policy and procedure to mitigate spread. At a certain point, though, I think you're right. You're going to have to get to a point to, okay, well, regardless if there's a vaccine or some therapeutic, we got to move on here. We have to start upping capacity or start to bring back businesses and economic life in Southern California that relates to the parks.
Yeah,
I know Ron DeSantis just had a governor of California, governor of Florida. Gotta get that right. Ron DeSantis just had a press conference with a meeting with a whole bunch of industry leaders when it comes to theme parks out east. And the big point was we have to start upping the capacity constraints on these theme parks to get more people back into the workforce.
Right.
Because those are a huge amount of jobs, with the various theme parks in that area. So you can be. It's for every individual to make their own assessment as far as if we're going to go to a theme park or if we're not, but the local governments of all these different places have taken that option away, and that's it from everybody, and that's the big sticking point right now.
Right. No, absolutely. It should be up to the individual. If you're young, let's say you're a young person, right, and you say you work at the parks, but you stay with your grandparents who are high risk. It would be up to that person to decide, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to talk to Disney or Universal and say, I live with high risk people. Is it possible I'm on leave for another month or whatever. And I'm sure these companies would work with you, and if they don't, shame on them. I mean, absolutely, these companies should work with people like that. But I mean, like you said, that's not even an option. I mean, a lot of these governments are just shutting it. Like, you're not allowed. That's it.
You're not allowed. And like we said before, Bob Iger, he wanted that kind of autonomy to say, hey, we want to make it our decision, but that's just not been available in California. And by the way, Disneyland Resort is the only, the two theme parks there, Disney California Adventure and Disneyland. Those are the only two theme parks in the world that have been closed this entire time.
Right.
When it comes to the Disney parks. So 12 parks, 9 of them are in operation currently. Those are the ones in Florida, Shanghai, Paris, and Tokyo. Hong Kong did open for a little bit, but it was closed. But even then, it wasn't a huge spreader or anything when it was open. And the other parks that have been open this entire time, they haven't been, they haven't been big spreaders either.
Right, yeah.
I just saw an article the other day. It was like, oh, well, all of these venues are super spreaders or whatever. And then they go off of like, okay, which one's more dangerous, less dangerous, and so forth. And kind of middle of the tier to high was going to an amusement park. And it's like, have you seen what they're doing? Have you seen what the policies that these different theme parks like Universal and Disney have implemented? I mean, it's almost the safest place you can be when it comes to, life on the outside.
No, yeah, you're right, Ray. You're absolutely right. I mean, going to a theme park even pre-COVID is a very controlled environment.
Yeah.
And now it's even more so. You go through a maze of plexiglass to get into the parks, and you got to wear a mask, and they enforce it. From what I understand, it seems heavily enforced. I just don't see the issue. Hopefully, I'm hearing like a lot of kind of rumblings that Disneyland Resort is going to open soon. Hopefully that's the case, because I think that like you said, with Florida, we've seen other parks open and they haven't really been super spreaders. People are people, and they're the same in California that they are in Florida. So if it hasn't been spreading that much in Florida, it's probably not going to spread that much in California.
One last point about this.
Sure.
Like you said, none of these parks have been super spreaders. It's kind of interesting too, because there is definitely a link being connected between vitamin D and with worse outcomes for COVID. So one can make the argument, hey, maybe being outside is maybe better than being inside all the time. And maybe theme parks are the best outlet for that, especially with the restrictions, capacity constraints. But think about this. The parks in Florida were opened, I believe, July 11th, starting of July 11th, and then they went from there. That was near the apex of their outbreak, of their outbreak numbers. You can track this too. Ever since the park opened, those numbers have continued to decline.
Wow.
We'd expect to see the exact opposite, but they opened right when the numbers were almost at their highest point, and they have gone down ever since, and in huge fashion too. So I'm just not seeing the evidence to suggest that these parks are super spreaders, especially the ones at Disney, especially with their mitigation practices in place. I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. I hopefully California's taking some notes and they open up soon. Hopefully.
I hope so. And you've seen me go off on Governor Gavin Newsom quite a bit on Twitter. It's just like, these places open already, but we'll see. There are other problems going on in California, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's been pretty wild. So our next topic, we're going to talk about, there's these crazy rumors, okay, that Disneyland is going to relocate from Anaheim, California to Texas. Now, I mean, obviously on its face, this sounds ridiculous, but I wanted to talk to you about it, Dre, because I think there's a lot here to kind of chew on, even though the rumor is probably total BS. But what are your thoughts on the rumor and the ramifications or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, listen, I think it's pretty clear. I've been telling people for the last 10 years, if Disney could move out of California, they'd do so in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, the political climate in California is very interesting as it relates to business. It hasn't been the most business-friendly place to operate out of. That's why you're seeing a lot of auto plants move out of the state. You're seeing a lot of manufacturing move out of the state, especially now. It's also a very litigious state. A lot of lawsuits are brought forward in California, whereas in other districts, it's just not the case. And it hasn't been the most business friendly, I'll say, when it comes to taxes and regulations and so forth. So if they could, they would. I've been telling people that for about the last 10 years. The problem is they have $50 billion worth of assets, at least, at Disneyland Resort. And
Yeah.
you can't just up and move those. Those are hard assets that are, they're there. They're there whether Disney or Disney is or isn't. And especially with this is also how you know this is not going anywhere. They're continually working on both Avengers Campus and Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway, which we'll get into later. But again, why would they invest more if they were going to be leaving in the next 5 years or whatever? It doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think the rumor is completely bunk. I do agree with you, though. I do think that if there was some sort of magic wand to stay completely on brand with Disney, if there was some sort of magic wand where they can just kind of move the Disneyland Resort to Texas and call it a day, they probably would. I think business-wise, like you said, the tax situation in Texas, I think Texas is more business friendly. I think they would absolutely love to do that. But logistically, it's just not an option. It would be probably, they would almost be better off just building a new resort in Texas than they would be moving the Disneyland Resort over there, because Texas, you could probably sustain a Disney resort. It's kind of the halfway point between Anaheim and Orlando. You could probably build a Disney resort in Texas and it would probably do very well. It just wouldn't make sense to move Disneyland over there. The cost would be tremendous, and like what you're saying too is a great point where their priorities are to continue the expansions and the investments here in Anaheim. Why would you do that? Why would you continue with Avengers Campus or Mickey and Minnie Runaway Railway if you weren't planning on staying here? But
that's just the thing. It's just there's really nothing to suggest it. We've heard before that Texas might be a site of a future Disney resort. There are many different factors as to why that might be. I think it's, land's cheap out there, very business friendly state. Visitation is actually quite good and will continue to increase, obviously, if there's increased demand like a Disney theme park.
Right.
There are benefits to doing it. The only thing I've ever heard that might be, that might not go in line with that would be that the thought of another Disney park might cannibalize the visitation of either Disneyland or Walt Disney World. And I say that because I believe Disney feels that the North American market is largely tapped out, that there is no driving force for a theme park in all of North America. It's just people come up all the way to Brazil to visit Walt Disney World. People come from Australia, Canada to visit Disneyland Resort. There's just not a lot of evidence to suggest that 3 resorts standalone would be sustainable and not affect the performance of either Disneyland Resort or Walt Disney World Resort.
That's a great point, Dre. And I think if they were to ever build, let's just say, hypothetical, if they were ever to build a third park or a third resort in Texas, the park or the resort would have to stand alone.
Yep.
And be very, very different to what the other 2 resorts offer. I think that you're right. I think if they were to build a standard Disney, a castle park, I absolutely think you're right. I think it would cannibalize Orlando and Anaheim. I think the only way they could really move forward with a Texas resort would be like if they did something similar to what they did or what the plans were for Disney's America. And was it Virginia they were planning on building that?
It was in Virginia, yeah.
Something like that. That would be sort of unique to the area, and where it's you can't get it in Orlando, you can't get it in Anaheim. This is unique to Disney Texas. That would probably be the only way that it would really be a sustainable thing that would minimize the cannibalization. But if you were just to build a standard Disney resort like a Castle Park or whatever with the standard Disney hotels and the standard Disney shopping district, it would cannibalize. It would absolutely cannibalize,
Yeah, and this is kind of interesting too. During the later Michael Eisner years, there were discussions about how do we build new offerings or resort entities without having permanentized theme parks attached to them and make it a wiser investment than something that's a huge risk, vis-a-vis Disneyland Paris. And one of those was Disney's America, like a very themed park driven to the locale in the area.
Right.
That was an idea, and I actually wish that park would have gone forward because I think it would have been very interesting.
Definitely.
Although with the current climate, maybe not so much. When it comes, and there was even Alauni was actually a resort property that was an idea. Okay, can we have standalone resorts throughout the country? And unfortunately, Alauni was the only real manifestation of that.
Wow.
But that was an idea to get visitation in other areas, not with a theme park attached. And there was another concept which was totally crazy, which was a floating theme park on an oil rig that would go around to areas along, Asia, Southeast Asia, Northern Africa, that could literally be docked, and you would have these attractions that could be there. You could do it for an entire season, and then you can get visitation in that way. So there have been creative ideas in the past regarding upping theme park attendance, or I should say upping visitation, whether a theme park is attached or not in different areas and locales. But you just the kinds of what should I say? The kind of demand that necessitates it has to be truly outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting about Alani and how they were kind of beta testing that kind of idea, that kind of concept. I've always felt, and this is kind of a little off topic, but I've always felt Australia would be a great spot for a Disney resort.
They were this close to getting one in Australia. This
really?
Close.
Really?
Yes, they had developed that idea for a long time, and getting a theme park out there. And there were some indication that it would support it. Unfortunately, there really has not been a long-term successful theme park operation in Australia, and I think that's what made them nervous. Also made them nervous, could the locals support it given their population?
Yeah.
Could there be enough international tourism to that area? But they were this close. They had developed the idea, and I believe that's partially where Soarin' came out of. Was an idea that they had drawn up for Disney Australia. But
that's interesting. That's very interesting. And you touched upon an interesting point too. I never heard that before with the floating theme park. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, look that up. It's a very interesting project. But they made a model, and it was just reconfiguring an oil rig and putting a theme park on it, and it would come into port. And it'd be there for a season. They'd hire locals in the area, train them up, have an operation, and then go to the next locale. Very interesting concept.
That is. Now, was that pre-Disney Cruise Lines or was that after? Do you know offhand?
Ooh, I think it was just after.
Okay.
I think it was just after. Yeah.
Okay, because I was just kind of thinking, like, I wonder if that was I was just wondering if Disney Cruise Lines was kind of like the watered down version of that, a floating theme park, so to speak. But
you know what? Actually, now that you bring it up, it might have been. It might have been. I believe you're right. They are interrelated in that way that you speak of. It was either right after or right before, but it was very, very close to the cruise lines.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So to close out this topic, we both can agree that the Disney Texas rumors are total bunk. But
No, look out for either Disney Brazil, Disney India.
Disney India.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
That's the big one. That's because they have, what is it, 1.4 billion people, I believe. I mean, it's a huge population, and that's the other kind of like, ooh, that's the emerging market.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So to wrap up this segment, we're going to talk now about Disney CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, came out recently, a few days ago, and talked about the priorities for Disney parks and resorts. And I wanted to discuss that with you, Dre. What are your thoughts on this subject?
So Christy McCarthy came out. She's the CFO for Disney, and she came out at the Bank of America Virtual 2020 Media Communications Entertainment Conference on Thursday, it says here. So she was speaking there and talking about the challenges as they relate to operating Disney in this current climate. That's quite a task right now, as you can possibly imagine. They're a studio, not actually in production of any movies. That's great. So they talked about investment at the parks. And apparently their capital expenditures when it comes to investment at the parks was reduced. They're saying to $1.2 billion. But that they were still going forward. They were still going forward with projects. We heard before that Bob Chapek was talking about, we're going to be taking a look at what we're doing going forward and how, we're going to have to make adjustments because the level of investment was high. I mean, I think it was up to like $25 billion at any one time. It was a huge investment all over the world. But it seems to have been reduced, and they've picked out some projects. And what's fascinating is that the two out of the three projects she mainly brought up were Disneyland Resort related. That Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway at Disneyland and Avengers Campus at Disney California Adventure. Now, I think Disney California Adventure, I think that was just, hey, we're 80% along with this thing.
Right.
let's just get it wrapped up. Let's get this going. As far as the big E-ticket that was, swirling around, you might want to hold off on that one a little bit. But that's not to say that that's not never going to come. I mean, there is huge interest in the Marvel properties. And if there was any one property that was going to have an investment, it's got to be Marvel. So, that might not even be off the table either. When it comes to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, this one was particularly interesting. I know we had debated previously whether or not Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway was going to go forward. But it looks like they're still going at it. And the one particular thing she brings up was the success of the existing Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway version at Disney's Hollywood Studios. That because it had opened right before the COVID outbreak, as it relates to America, the surveys were already out. That the response was so huge that did indeed may have been a huge driving factor in going forward with Mickey's Runaway Railway. You see, you have to understand there are many competing forces within Disney. There are the kind of the fiscally conservative bean counters who are saying, no, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. There are people that are far more ambitious. We should do this, and we should do this for this reason. We should do this for that reason. You have people that simply want to create anything. They just want a chance to create anything they want. And so there are a bunch of competing interests. And what's interesting is it sounds like they were savvy enough to bring up those surveys and say, hey, look, this is the justification for doing this project in particular. Now, we know a lot of the supplies that were going to be used in the creation of Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in Disneyland were already coming forward. But it seems to be that there were enough, there was enough of a fight. There was enough ammo to work with to really get that going, and that's really, really good news for Disneyland.
It is, and it makes me wonder. I've been saying for a while, I think the Disneyland Resort is much more recession-proof, much more COVID shutdown proof than Florida because it doesn't rely as much on tourism. I mean, there's a lot of
Absolutely.
annual pass holders, there's a lot of locals where you can kind of just almost on a whim, just pack up the car and go to Disneyland, right? Where Florida is much more of an extensive process. You got to book a hotel, you got to
Yep.
a lot of times book a flight or what have you. And when I saw this priority list, I'm kind of thinking like, I wonder if that's indicative of Disney sort of kind of admitting, so to speak, that Disneyland is more set up for growth in the post-COVID world, at least in the next couple of years, because of that. They seem to be putting a priority in Disneyland Resort.
Absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. That is 100%. Anybody who was looking at the situation, they definitely use that as an argument for we should be investing here because it is so much better poised than almost any resort in the world to really grow. I mean, look at the response that we're seeing over there at Knott's Berry Farm with their Taste of Knott's. It is hugely successful, extremely popular. They sell out almost every single day, and the demand is there. Look at Downtown Disney. There are lines out the gate for that thing every single day, every single night. So the demand in the Southern California market is there. The old tried and true kind of Stanford Research Institute line of thinking when it comes to the Disneyland Resort, that is as applicable as it was back then as today. There is a locally driven population that is extremely excited about getting back into the theme parks, and it's undeniable.
Yeah. Now, in terms of Florida, now correct me if I'm wrong. The only thing that I noticed on Florida that she listed, that McCarthy listed as a priority, was the Star Wars hotel, right?
Yes, that was the Star Wars. That was a real big surprising.
I was going to say that is a big surprise because, like, I do think the tourism market's dead for a while, and when they brought that up, I was like, okay, you guys are really doubling down.
Well, and that's just the thing. You're not even talking about a new resort hotel or whatever. You're talking about a completely new concept that is very much like a cruise line. Which, by the way, she does bring that up too. Like, oh, that business is like that's the last of our businesses coming back, but you still are going forward towards this Star Wars hotel concept, and that was really alarming because if you want to talk about, okay, I guess they're not worried about interactivity because these were going to be very small spaces, these were going to be very intimate environments, intimate experiences, and that one is still going forward. That blew me away. That shocked me because that was a risky venture even before this.
That one really, really surprised me. Yeah, because you mentioned it is kind of like you said, a very intimate experience, almost a claustrophobic experience because you're not even seeing outside world. You're very much enclosed in your room. And then, you kind of do a bunch of like interactive things like a Savi's lightsaber workshop kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Where you go and you build things or you do things. So that really, really shocked me. They must believe in that concept, I guess. I mean,
I think they must believe in it. That's one. Two, I think because of how many rooms that there were going to be, it's not super risky, if that makes sense. And also too, well, yeah, it's poised to make a lot of money when it comes to the amount of what a rate is over there. But besides all that, I believe another thing was it was Bob Chapek's is one of his pet projects. That was one he was really excited about, and one that he wanted to bring over all over the world.
Wow, interesting. Very interesting. That'll be very. I'm very curious about that. Now, have you heard any news on the new tower at Disneyland Hotel?
Yeah. So. Blog Mickey reported that the posted permits that were outside of the fences were gone. Now, sometimes it's a matter of, well, those are permit applications, and once they're approved, they get taken down. Okay. But it was kind of interesting. It didn't sound like that was the case. Now, the city of Anaheim is saying, no, that project's still going forward. We're still, we still have to just set on some deadlines. But that project is still in the pipeline. That is not going anywhere. it would seem, and there are some barriers to entry when it comes to a new hotel facility, but this was an expansion of an existing one, so you don't necessarily have those barriers to overcome. It seems they're going forward, but it's very interesting. Now the one that got knocked off for sure is the lakeside property at Walt Disney World. That one's out. They're not going forward with that one, from what I understand, from what I've heard from my sources. That the lakeside property, what was it called? It was called the riverfront properties, the villas that were out there.
Right.
That's just not going forward. But there seems to be enough of a driving force for the DVC property in Disneyland, and largely because they don't really have a DVC only facility as of right now. That might have been one of the driving forces in getting that done. It seems that is going forward, but I don't know, man. I mean, it's a very volatile time for the company. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. That is interesting, though. That's very, very interesting. And hopefully by the time these open, whether it be the DVC Tower or the Star Cruiser Star Wars Hotel, hopefully this pandemic is very much behind us, and they do very well, hopefully.
It does feel, at least in the States, it feels like we're really rounding the corner. And it seems that you can exist within a pandemic and still do business in regards to theme parks. I think it's really working out. So we'll see.
We'll see. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next subject. I wanted to leave a few minutes because I love having you, Andre, and you always bring a lot of interesting stuff to the table.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to talk about? Like, this is kind of like a wild card segment, like whether it be like, Mulan on Disney Plus. I know that's been the big deal lately, or whatever it is. Is there anything wild card you want to discuss before we close?
Yeah. So to wrap up our previous segment, the things that we know are still going forward are Tron and Guardians of the Galaxy. That's for sure. But the other thing is I guess there's a discussion within Walt Disney Imagineering regarding, this is a term that they've used before, which is the envelope of protection. And that is, if you're in a ride vehicle and if you reached out with an outstretched arm, can you hit any of the walls around you or another track or something? They use it previously limited to just being in a ride vehicle, but now there is a suggestion that they might actually be using the term envelope of protection as it relates to keeping people separated for physical distancing and incorporating that kind of philosophy into their designs going forward.
Wow.
We'll see if that manifests itself, but they definitely are taking that into account. So I don't know. We'll see. The other thing was not spray foam. So there was a question on Twitter about this, like, why hasn't Disneyland? And I know some people around, some people in my field have been saying why Disneyland hasn't done something similar, having maybe not the entire park open in terms of attractions, but still having like a festival type atmosphere, at least in California Adventure or something. And honestly, it just relates to the business, to the operations of Disneyland being so fundamentally different than Knott's Berry Farm. They can be a lot more flexible. It's smaller. It's a smaller team. They're a lot more nimble. We've talked about that previously and what that means. But also too, I think Disney really wanted to put the pressure on the government of California to open up the parks fully. So if you acquiesce and you have a partial opening, do you still have your leverage?
Right.
So that might have been an influencing decision in terms of going forward with something like that. Let's see. Yeah, so we talked about that. Do you want to talk about Mulan?
Let's do it. Let's talk about it. I think that's it seems like it's a kind of a like a hot topic issue right now, and I really want to get your viewpoint on this.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
I know you liked it, and that's good.
Yeah,
I do like that people really enjoyed it, and that's good to see. I mean, these things are properties; they're meant to, they're meant for people to enjoy. I'm glad that people got enjoyment out of it. Now, as far as it relates to me and what I would have done, I would have buried that thing. I would not have released that anywhere near 2020. This is far too contentious time for a film like that.
Yeah. Okay. Now you're talking more about like politically, not so much the quality of the film, but more about. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because there's so many external factors when it comes to this film. You'll remember that the lead actress, and I am blanking on her name, and I do not have it in my notes. I do apologize. But the lead actress had stated previously that she was for the police forces in Hong Kong.
Right.
And which would suggest that she's against the Free Hong Kong movement. That was a pretty contentious issue when it happened.
Very.
Although I will say a lot of people didn't know about the geopolitical forces at play before COVID. Now, post-COVID, it's very interesting. It's come to light that she was born in Wuhan, China, which there's a lot of interesting things coming out of there.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yes, but the real particular interesting thing to note is it's no secret that the Chinese market and the government officials in China in particular have had extensive influence on Hollywood productions, as they relate to productions coming out of, big studios in the United States for international distribution. And it seems to really reared its ugly head, particularly with this film. For example, Mushu wasn't included because the officials in China didn't feel that it honored it was befitting for a dragon or that kind of iconography to be associated with that character. And it seems they've had a number of different influencing factors when it comes to plot points and faction names and just all kinds of stuff. And it's starting to really come to light, and people are kind of getting tired of the Chinese influence on American productions. We've seen this before. I remember one of the Transformer films that was produced. This was some years ago, but the woman who was being interviewed, attempting to hype the film in the States, just said, "Listen, this film really wasn't made for this market," which was a stunning admission, and it was saying they were producing films essentially just for China because it had become so profitable out there, and it really is interesting. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the government officials in China limit what can be distributed in China. They only allow, I think, like 15 American films per year.
Interesting.
And what qualifies is they have a lot of influence over the productions in America simply because they have to meet the qualifying standards to have a film released there. And so you don't get access to the Chinese market unless you play ball, essentially. Wow. And that seems to really have come out in Mulan a lot more than people are comfortable with. And then you have the whole problem about where they filmed it and who they thanked in the credits. And people can look this up. I won't get into it because I don't, it's a little bit, it's not for it's not for this channel. Let's just put it that way. But there are some really kind of like, people are just kind of uncomfortable with what's been going on as it relates to Disney and China and their, Chinese influence and all those kinds of stuff. It's really alarming.
Yeah, that is. Well, yeah, I've heard all the blowback in regard to this film, the political blowback, where it was filmed. I won't get too far into it either, but where it was filmed and things like that. I know the government, our government, is very concerned with the relationship, between Disney and the Chinese. So that's interesting.
I think I brought this up last time. I'll bring this up this time. The United States Attorney General just gave a speech very recently, and he put Disney on blast.
Wow.
He just said, "Look, listen, you guys were an American company. You guys have been very pro-America in the past, but your actions as of recent, as they relate to China, don't suggest that anymore, is what he was saying. And it was eye-opening.
Now, do you think because of the blowback, the pushback from Mulan, Disney will sort of pull back a little bit with its Chinese relations, or do you think it's going to continue and they're going to kind of ignore it and just kind of move forward as they want?
I don't think they're ignoring it. I think they're ignoring it. I think they're definitely taking that into account going forward. The economic relations regarding China and the United States are at a boiling point. It's a tough time.
Yeah,
it's a tough time as it relates to that, and we're going headlong into either an economic cold war or maybe even worse. And there might be a point where the revenue stream that comes out of China is no longer available. And so the question really becomes, do you attempt to go forward to placate the Chinese market expecting that you'll get returns from said market, or do you go forward with something that's a bit more ambiguous as it relates to that and something that is more universally accepted? And so I think that's kind of the balancing act going throughout the halls of Disney right now. It's no mistake. The Chinese market was the second and becoming one of the greatest markets in terms of film distribution in the world. And
they've been huge for the Marvel movies. Huge.
Massive for the Marvel movies. And they did want to duplicate that effect with Lucasfilm. They were not really successful in that, but that was the intention going forward.
Yeah.
And it's a massive market for them. Massive. Why do you think they have two parks in China?
Yeah.
Rather than just one, or I should say two resorts in China rather than just one, as we've seen, everywhere else other than the States. That really was like, hey, that was the up and coming. The disposable income was thought to have been, this is the 1950s in China. So when you see Disneyland and you see here in the States and you see the 1950s going forward and the economic boom that we had from that point, they believe that China was at that point there, that they could capitalize on that economic growth. But it turns out that they did a lot to try to get into there, and maybe they did too much.
Yeah. Wow. Now it's interesting. It's very interesting to see how they're going to move forward now with theme parks, with movies, and everything going forward. Now, I do want to ask you on a. Now did you see Mulan? Did you watch it?
I haven't. No, I haven't yet.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Okay. I was going to ask you what your thoughts on the film, but you haven't watched it yet?
I have not seen it yet. I'm wanting to. I just haven't had the time allotted to do it, but I do have it. I do have a copy of it. I do have it, I should say, pre-purchased on Disney Plus. I'm planning to watch it, and I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's all very, very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to what people are, where their opinions are coming from. If you want to know more about any of this stuff going forward when it comes to Hollywood, there's a great video from the Foundation for Economic Education called "China Doesn't Want You to Watch This Video." Very, very interesting critique as it relates to all of this. I think it'd be very, really interesting for your viewers to see it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And Dre, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. And thank you so much. Now, let everybody know at home where they can find you on social media. I
am at VashSky on Twitter. That's the best way to reach me and to follow my thoughts and feelings on everything. So it's going to be at V as in Victor, ASHSKY, at VashSky. That's where I'm at.
Perfect. And you guys, definitely give him a follow. Dre is awesome. He's awesome. He always gives a lot of great insight, a lot of detail.
It's too much.
He's awesome. So check him out for sure. But thanks again, buddy. I do appreciate coming on. Next time I have you on, we'll discuss a little bit about Mulan,
Yeah.
in terms of the film itself and everything.
Yeah.
I'm curious to, to hear your viewpoint on it, because I have so many opinions on that movie.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that'll be a discussion for another time, I suppose.
It'll be next time for sure. But thank you, Dre,
Mhm.
for coming on. I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment below. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye now.